Well, Donald Trump will return to the White House as a convicted felon. There are also numerous active criminal cases pending against him. But his reelection, it makes prosecuting him much more difficult. Here's a look now at where those cases stand.
The first former president convicted of a felony. Now, with re-election, the first felon to be president. With the help of a remarkable series of legal delays and court decisions, Donald Trump is headed back to the White House. Earlier this year, his legal calendar was daunting. He faced 4 separate cases and 91 separate charges. They included a federal election interference trial and a federal case about Trump's holding on to classified documents after he left office, a state-level election interference case in Georgia, and a New York State hush money business fraud case. The federal election interference case, led by special counsel Jack Smith, seemed to be the biggest of all and could have sent Trump to prison for 20 years or more. It covered his efforts to stay in office after he lost the 2020 election, including his encouraging a crowd to march on the Capitol building on January 6, 2021. That case seemed to fall apart when the Supreme Court ruled in July that presidents have absolute immunity while performing their constitutional duties. Trump has promised to fire Jack Smith, while his Justice Department could simply dismiss the case. Smith will reportedly step down before Trump takes office. The federal classified documents case was also brought by Jack Smith, claiming that Trump took classified national security documents with him when he left the White House, and then took measures to conceal his actions. A federal judge appointed by Trump dismissed the case in July. Smith appealed, but a Trump administration attorney general is likely to drop that appeal. Trump can't stop the other 2 cases because they're not federal. The Georgia election subversion case was based on actions Trump took to try to change the results in Georgia after the 2020 election, a state he lost. The case was thrown into turmoil, however, by revelations of an alleged romantic affair between the lead prosecutors. And a Georgia appeals court froze the case indefinitely in June. And the New York State hush money case, in which Trump was found guilty on 34 charges of filing false business records. That's based on payments he made to pornographic film actress Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election, allegedly to buy her silence about an affair to keep that information from hurting his campaign. The judge in that case has announced he'll make a decision about sentencing as early as next week and could pass a sentence on November 26th. Trump's lawyers are likely to argue that presidential immunity means he can't be sentenced until his term ends. Trump could pardon himself for any federal convictions, but with those cases winding down, he very likely won't have to. And he can't pardon himself for his New York State hush money convictions. He could, however, ask New York State's governor, a Democrat, for a pardon.
All right, I want to get more now from our chief international editor, Richard Walker. He's in Washington, D.C. tonight. Richard, good to see you. I mean, things are happening quickly, aren't they? The Trump cabinet is taking shape. One possible nomination here, raising some eyebrows even for Republicans, and that is Matt Gaetz, who Trump wants to be the next attorney general. If you could, Richard, what would Gaetz's to-do list look like at DOJ?
Yeah, well, Brent, I think we're not really talking, we're kind of beyond raised eyebrows in the case of Matt Gaetz. I mean, this is really seen as kind of a bombshell, I don't know, like eyebrows on fire or something like that, in terms of the response that there has been to Donald Trump putting Matt Gaetz's name forward. I mean, we've heard a bit there just, of course, in the introduction, but he is a really extremely controversial figure who is on the kind of disruptive, kind of far-right fringe of the Republican Party. He's He's been a close ally of Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think that is a name that many people will recognize, and somebody who's really made enemies within the Republican Party. So, for instance, I think many viewers will probably remember this phase when the Republican Party was at war with itself in the House of Representatives and pulled the rug from under its own Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. Well, it was Matt Gaetz who was very much spearheading that effort and made very much an enemy in the now former Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, who he successfully managed to turf out. And I think there's a sense that Donald Trump, in picking him as his nominee to lead, to be Attorney General, to lead the Department of Justice, that he wants that kind of attitude in there. And if you look at what Trump has said publicly on his social media posts, he wants somebody who's kind of have a root and branch disruptive effect within the Department of Justice. But I think the concern is that it will only serve to politicize the Department of Justice, which the Republicans claim has been politicized under Joe Biden, but that this threatens to take that much, much further. I should add, though, it's quite interesting. You see that there are one or two voices coming out and saying, well, Matt Gaetz has actually made a bit of a profile for himself on slightly unexpected areas, whether it's cannabis reform or also in terms of taking on big tech companies. For instance, saying that the non-compete clauses, which now this sounds kind of wonky, but it's quite an interesting topic. That a lot of tech companies force new employees to sign what are called non-compete clauses, which are things that essentially kind of tie them to that company so that they cannot then go and work for another company within a certain amount of time afterwards if they want to. That Matt Gaetz has been allying with some Democrats on trying to take on those sort of companies. So you've got some interesting voices on the left also coming in saying, hey, this guy isn't necessarily so bad. But I think that just goes to what a potentially disruptive pick this person is, with praise from the MAGA front to the far left, but many mainstream Republicans pretty uncomfortable with him, I think.
And if we were to have Matt Gaetz as the Attorney General, this would be an Attorney General who was himself investigated by the Justice Department on suspicion of child sex trafficking. The U.S. House was about to take up this investigation. With all of this, do you think that the majority of Republicans, particularly in the Senate, are they going to support him, or will there be some Republican outliers here?
So I think that is the question, yeah, that whether Gaetz is a bit more of a kind of a sort of a showy nomination that is considered unlikely to get through the Senate. So the Republicans have 53 seats in the upcoming Senate. And I was speaking to one Republican a few weeks before the election who was talking about the kinds of nominations that Donald Trump would be able to come up with. And the more controversial ones, he said you would need 53, maybe 54 seats in the Senate to be able to overcome the possibility of Republican defections. So we're kind of just on the edge there. But I think Matt Gaetz is just about as controversial a pick as you could potentially come up with for the incoming administration. So we shall see, but there have already been quite critical comments coming from, for instance, Susan Collins, the senator from Maine, also the senator from Alaska. So we shall see. But I think another sign that Donald Trump is really trying to kind of mix it up with the nominations that he's making for his new administration. And I guess we should have expected exactly that to happen.
Yeah, eyebrows on fire. That's a great image, Richard, that we're going to have for the rest of the evening. Our chief international editor, Richard Walker in Washington. Richard, thank you. With Trump and the justice system, to talk about that, I'm joined now by Barbara Perry. She's a professor in presidential studies and co-chair of the Presidential Oral History Program at the University of Virginia. She has written more than a dozen books on U.S. presidents. Professor, it's good to have you with us tonight. Donald Trump, as you know, is the first convicted felon to ever be elected U.S. president. He has these pending investigations or these cases against him. Put all of this, if you could, into some type of historical context for us. I mean, we've never seen anything like Trump before, have we?
We have not, and thank you for having me with you. It is the case that Donald Trump is, as I say, always unprecedented in just about everything that he does. And this is no different. The closest I think you can say that we've come to this, if we put it in historical context, would be Richard Nixon during the Watergate scandal. But he was listed as an unindicted co-conspirator in that case that involved the Watergate break-in by his minions of the committee to re-elect him. And so he was never indicted to begin with, therefore he never came up for trial. And then when he resigned in August of 1974, his vice president, Gerald Ford, became president and pardoned Richard Nixon for any future possible litigation once he was out of the presidency. But again, that's the closest we can get. But everything that relates to Donald Trump, including this Supreme Court decision granting him immunity, is also ahistorical and unprecedented.
Yeah, this is uncharted territory. Trump's attorneys argue that these charges against him, these proceedings, they all have to stop while he is in office. I'm wondering, do Trump's legal woes, do they disappear when he assumes his second presidential term in January? Is it that black and white?
I think it is, particularly in the federal cases, and you had an excellent report leading up to our conversation, because even if the decisions of courts would be to carry on with these federal cases, and I don't think that they will be. And as you said, Jack Smith, the special prosecutor in both the federal cases, is already saying that he will resign and step down from that position before Trump is inaugurated. I think that those cases will go away even before Trump becomes president. If they're still ongoing while he's president, he will have his Justice Department, presumably led by Matt Gaetz, just push them aside. So those will go away. And I actually think the same will happen in the state cases in New York and Georgia as well.
I want to pick up on Matt Gaetz. You're reading my mind here. I mean, if he becomes the Attorney General at the Department of Justice, he could use his office to seek revenge, which is what has been implied or intimated several times by Donald Trump. Do you think we are looking at dark days for U.S. justice beginning in January?
I think we are, and there's a symbol that is in the U.S. Supreme Court and often used for symbolizing justice in the United States, and it is Lady Justice, a figure, a symbolic figure, holding the scales of justice so that the scales are even, and she is blindfolded because she is meant not to be having one bias towards one party or another. So justice is blind, it is often said, and the scales of justice are to be even. I think that Matt Gaetz will take the blindfold off of Lady Justice.
What about Gaetz himself? He's been facing a U.S. Congressional Ethics Panel probe into allegations of sex trafficking and illicit drug use against him. Sex with a minor, I think was the charge. Do those probes, do they just go away on the spot if he becomes Attorney General?
Well, first we should note that the Justice Department did investigate him and some of his cronies, but that no charges were brought against Matt Gaetz. But a committee in the House of Representatives, an ethics committee, was investigating him about these charges that would be ethics charges, professional charges, political charges, if you will, brought against him, perhaps to try to take him out of the House. But he resigned yesterday when he was named or nominated to be Attorney General. So I think those House ethics probes will go away too.
Yeah, well, definitely a lot of new material for a new book about the next president, that is for sure. Professor Barbara Perry, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, as Donald Trump's administration continues to take shape, one thing has become clear: Elon Musk will be part of it. The incoming president's wealthiest supporter is set to be Washington's efficiency czar, co-director of the new Department of Government Efficiency. But Musk and Trump's flowering friendship, it is a fairly new phenomenon.
Is this a dream match? The world's most powerful man and the world's richest man, the Trump-Musk bromance bloomed during the final weeks of the U.S. presidential election.
Fight, fight, fight!
He created the first major American car company in generations, and his rocket company is the only reason we can now send American astronauts into space.
As you can see, I'm not just MAGA, I'm dark MAGA.
President Trump must win to preserve the Constitution. He must win to preserve democracy in America.
Musk used to sound much different, being a generous supporter of Democratic candidates and keeping his distance from Trump during his first term in the White House. He has since changed course and donated at least $132 million to the Trump campaign. Chump change for Musk, of course, whose wealth was most recently pegged at $290 billion, up over 10% since the election. Business analysts at Informa expect him to become the world's first trillionaire by 2027. Musk's business career began with an online city guide company named Zip2 Corp in 1995. 4 years later, he co-founded the online payment company X.com that merged with PayPal. Musk started SpaceX in 2001, took over Tesla in 2004. He launched satellite internet provider Starlink in 2015 and neurotechnology startup Neuralink in 2016. In 2017, he launched The Boring Company. Lastly, in 2022, Musk took over social media giant Twitter and later renamed it X. He still owned the domain from his earlier venture of the same name. Time and again, Elon Musk has proven to be a man of ideas, but he's also often sidetracked. Lately, Tesla investors were protesting their CEO's constant absence and focus on X and politics. Also, Musk's leadership style has been described as reckless. Now, that can be helpful when you're trying to cut wasteful spending. But can he be trusted to cut at the right end? Musk is as much an egomaniac and narcissist as Donald Trump himself, and he has proven one thing for sure, that first of all, he's looking out for himself. That could translate into some policy changes that might directly benefit his own companies, possibly with regards to NASA's contracts with SpaceX, regulation of electric vehicles, or even freedom of speech issues pertaining to X. And while Trump has announced that Musk will help the administration dismantle bureaucracy and restructure federal agencies, Musk has, for now, announced another side gig, selling merchandise celebrating his latest gig.